So today I'm going to describe the test to you. You know it already. But I'm going to try and describe why it looks the way it does. I'm going to help you understand these assessment criteria, because sometimes you might think you understand the assessment criteria, but I'll try and explain them a little bit better to you so that you can see which bits are more important than others. We'll talk about needs analysis a little bit. That means, what do your students need? Now, when you start a class, you actually start with a needs analysis. Do you actually work out if it's prepositions or tenses or concepts, or is it a particular skill that they need to work on? I suggest this is a good starting point for any class. So I would build it in to what you do in your classrooms. One of the big issues for all teachers is error correction, right? How do you correct errors? Do you correct errors? Some theorists would say, well, you don't. Some theorists would say you correct every error. Others would say you would only correct some errors. We'll talk a little bit about that, about which errors you should correct for IELTS and which ones you can let go. And we will look at some scripts, and you should have these scripts with you. We'll look at some of these scripts here in this little booklet here together, but we won't do that immediately. But can I borrow yours? Thank you very much. I'll give you $10. This is a very important document. This is the guide for teachers, and it's important because it has some really important information in it. It basically talks about the test format, but more importantly, it gives you some tips on page 12, tips from teachers for teachers and also for students. And it also has some very important information about the assessment criteria. So the assessment criteria starting on page 18, 19, 20, etc. We'll look at those in detail later on. Okay, I've already mentioned what you have in your pack, the guide for teachers. We're going to start, as I said, with the writing. And as you know, there are 2 tasks in the writing, and test takers are asked to write 400 words. So that's quite difficult, 400 words in 1 hour, 150 words, and then 250 words. Let me ask you, are most of your students doing the academic test, or is it the general training? Academic. Who teaches people who are more interested in general training? Anyone? Some. Okay, some. We'll talk about both of them. Now, the academic and the general training, as you know, are very similar, except for this task, the task 1. The task 2 is much the same. Task 2 for academic, task 2 for general training are really very much the same. We're going to look at the tasks, and we're going to look at the assessment criteria for them. One of the things that is a continual problem for students and for test takers is that their score for writing is less than their score for speaking or for reading or for listening. And I'll try and explain why that might be the case today. But first, let's look at the structure of the test. And it's an important thing to realise that it wasn't just somebody in Cambridge saying, oh, let's give them this. It was somebody in Cambridge saying, well, how do we properly assess writing? And the way that the task 1 is structured is different to the way the task 2 is structured. The task 1 is is a more direct and tightly controlled task. We make sure that the task is very clear in task 1 and it's a little less clear in task 2. That means that there is no time wasted in task 1 on thinking up ideas, because you are simply describing something. You don't need to actually explain anything in an academic task 1. You describe it. Now this might be one of the reasons why your students don't get the score they want in writing, because sometimes a candidate will look at the graph or the table and then try and explain why something is the case. It'll be a table of profits for a company, and they will say, yes, this company is very successful. It's more successful than other companies because they innovate, they produce more things. They're very well organized. No, don't say that, because that is not what you are asked to do in task 1. You simply describe the figures. And here is an example of a task 1. You may have seen this before, but this is probably too easy, too simple. In a real IELTS test, there would be a graph like that and probably a table to accompany it, or a line graph like that and maybe a pie chart or something like that. But the important thing to tell your students is that always we are given the same information. They are always told to spend 20 minutes on the task. They are always told to summarize the information and report the main features and to make comparisons. Now, if they fail to summarize, if they fail to cover all the main features, if they fail to compare, then they will get a low score for the first criterion, task achievement. So you should remind them. They are told every time, and they're told how many words to write. So what are the main features here? So I think one main feature is that younger people go to the cinema more than older people.
More than the other.
Older, less old, youngest. And the general trend is upward. They are the main features. But there's another main feature. For one group, there is a trend downwards. So 3 main features, maybe 4 main features, maybe 5 main features. And usually there will be some similarities, but there will also be a difference as well. So your students should be looking for the similarities and the differences. We'll look at some examples of that in a minute. When you teach, do you go to a book to find these things? For examples like that? Do you get them out of a book? Yeah? Well, that's okay. But if you go to a newspaper, for example, the Dhaka Tribune. Anyone read this? I read it today. I read it over breakfast. It's quite good. Maybe the Dhaka Tribune doesn't have much to say about IELTS, but it does have task 1 every day. Now that's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you don't need to buy a book. Well, you do. You need to have textbooks as well. But if you're encouraging your students to go and get a newspaper every day, to go and look at things like this every day, you are enabling them to become learners outside the classroom. And this is very important. This is an extremely important thing. Because as teachers, one thing we do is to teach content, to teach grammar, to teach vocabulary. But another thing that we teach is how to learn. And this is a really important thing. You must always be thinking, okay, what am I doing that is teaching my students how to learn? And that's, I think, a very important thing to always be thinking about as a teacher. Is what I'm doing helping them to become learners, or is it stopping them from becoming learners? Are they sitting just waiting for me, or are they going out and becoming learners themselves? Okay, so there's an example. Here's another example. Now this is a table. Here we have the statistics for the world's 6 largest countries in 2012. That's where I come from. Okay, Australia. The biggest countries in terms of area, of course.
But the lowest part of the table, I guess.
Sorry?
Lowest part of the table.
Yes, with the lowest. If it was the World Cup, we wouldn't make the final. Okay. Yeah. Although the Cricket World Cup, we are going to make the final.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe not.
Good luck.
A table like this, you have to think about the same things as with the graph. Where are the similarities and where are the differences? So where are the similarities? I think there are some similarities here. 9.6, 9.6.
USA.
Yeah. So China and the US are about the same size. But there's a big difference here. This comparison tells us that China is full of people and the United States doesn't have so many people. Some big countries like Australia and Canada have tiny populations. This is now 25 million, by the way. It's gone up. But still tiny. Now, how do you teach that? You should, I recommend that every day you bring in something, and you can put it up on a projector, or you could just hand it out to people in groups and say, okay, what are 4 similarities and 2 differences? If you do that every day, then they will get the idea of looking for those things quickly, because you have to do it quickly. So here's one way of doing it. Here I've written up some sentences, and this is to help your students think about, okay, there doesn't seem to be a relationship between something and population size. What do you think the missing word is? Yep. What about number 2? There is, however, a relationship between the amount of arable land and
An area might be between the same China area.
maybe and population. So here we have a lot of arable land, and we have quite a big population, a lot of arable land and a very big population. Not much arable land here, and quite a small population. By the way, this word arable, is that a new word? When you teach, do you organise your whiteboard? Do you all have a whiteboard? When you teach? A big one?
Yes.
I always do this. On one side of the whiteboard, I put a column for new words. Why do I do that? Because every day, every session that we have, we will get some new words, maybe 6 or 7 or 8 new words. And then the next time we have a session, what will happen? We will review those words. Now, what am I doing? I'm training my students to be good learners. They need to write down new words every day, and they need to revise them. Let's start with Aramon, okay? Now, of course, it's explained here. IELTS doesn't use odd words unless they're explained. They're explained in the text, or they're explained like this in a footnote. Arable land is land that can be used for food production. Alright, we'll come back to this later on. And finally, number 3, the USA and China are pretty similar in all respects except population. So similar, but very different. Now here we have, as the teacher, I have produced 3 beautiful sentences. And my students have looked at these sentences and they've been able to look at the table and they've been able to try and work out what the similarities and what the differences are, okay? But when you have a beautiful sentence like this, don't waste it. Don't waste it. Because we can use transformation drills. You know transformation drills?
Yeah.
Or substitution drills? These are useful. It's old-fashioned in English teaching, but it's very useful, especially for IELTS. For example, what's your name? Sabir. Sabir. Sorry?
Sabir. Sabir.
What's your... Sorry, say your name again.
Sabir.
Sabir.
You have
Sabir.
You stress on
you have to utter R.
Stress where?
No,
on
R.
the B.
Sabir.
Bengali is a difficult language.
English is difficult because you don't pronounce ah. You say like ah. So, you know, my name is Nirjhar. So Nirjhar. So when I was in England, there's a Nirjhar.
Okay. It sounds the same.
Okay.
Sabir. Sabir.
Something red.
Sabir. Sabir. And Don, right?
Yeah.
We both are interested in teaching, right?
Yes.
We're both very smart, but he's very young, right? Make a sentence. Sabir and Don. In all respects, except age. Very good. Oh.
And except the hazard.
Yeah. Cricket. Who likes cricket? Anyone?
Yeah.
Very good. Coley. Coley and Sabir.
Sakib al-Hasan.
Who?
You don't talk about Sakib al-Hasan.
Doesn't matter. Coley and
Australian player.
and Joe Root, right? They're very good batsmen, right? Very good batsmen. They make a lot of money, but Coley, his wife, is a very famous film star, correct? Make a sentence.
You know that, right?
Make a sentence. Yeah? Except? Okay, the type of wife they have. Alright, look, but that's an example, right? It's a silly example. But my point is this. If you have some good English, then try and suck as much out of it as you can. Squeeze it. Every drop that comes out is useful for your students. So substitution drills will help in that way. Okay. So let's look at general training task 1, because some of you are training your students for
Mr. Don.
that. Now here is a typical
Just
Yeah, question.
So, you wrote doesn't. Can you use the word doesn't in the contraction form?
yes,
In a formal writing in task 1.
yes.
We can use, right?
Some people think that you should not use contractions when you write an IELTS essay. My belief, and I'm not wrong, is that contractions are quite okay in writing.
In all kinds of formal writing now.
In IELTS writing, it's okay. If you go to university, you might get a lecturer who says don't use contractions, but IELTS is fairly relaxed about that. But when I say contractions, make sure that you use normal contractions, right? Don't is good, but gonna is bad, okay? So just a normal grammatical contraction is good, but others don't use them, okay? Here is an example of a general training task 1, and again, in the same way, yeah, another question.
What about and ampersand?
And
Using-
or ampersand?
Yes. Which one is correct?
Well, I think I would not use the ampersand because it's not really formal enough, okay? But if you did use it, it would not be a big problem. It's not a big problem. I would always use and. There's no advantage in using an ampersand, okay? Remember with the academic task 1, the information was given in exactly the same way. And here it is too, in general training task 1. Always there is a situation. Always you are told who to write to. Always you are told 1, 2, 3, or maybe 4 things that you have to cover, all right? And you are always told how to begin. Now this is important. If you're told to write to someone you don't know, it must be a formal letter. And you're told that, dear sir or madam. How do you finish a formal letter? Maybe sincerely or yours faithfully. Sincerely is okay. Sincerely is okay. Some people have different ideas about that, but sincerely is okay. Faithfully is probably even better. If it's an informal letter, dear ... What do you do? You put something in the ...
Dear Don.
Yeah, dear Don, dear
Someone named
or dear Mary or something like that. And then how do you finish that?
With love.
With love, regards, any way you like. Yours, cheers, it doesn't matter. Okay? Now what happens if you forget to mention one of these things? I forgot. I didn't say how I found out about the plan. What score do you get?
Probably 4.5 in task achievement.
Yes, that's right. You get a 4 for task achievement. So that's a very important thing. You've got to tell your students that you must mention all of those things. And you must have the correct tone. Dear sir or madam, how are you? Okay?
No.
No. That's bad tone. You don't know this person. Dear sir or madam, I am writing to express my annoyance. This is formal language. Dear Samir. Samir. Dear bro. I am writing to express my annoyance. Good?
No.
No. Wrong tone. Dear Sabir, how are you? That's good. I'm well. Okay. Remember, you're always told to write 150 words. You're always told to write for 20 minutes. Now look, let's look at an example. Can you see that okay or not?
Yeah.
You can't see it at the back. No. Come up if you want it. Come up to the front if you want it. Come. Come close. Come close if you want it. Just come. It's good exercise. Good exercise for you if you want it. I'll read it out. Yeah, come. Come. Stand here.
And stand there.
Dear sir or madam. Okay, now remember, the task was how you describe how you learned about the plans, right? Say what you think about the park, and then say what you think about the plans. So here, dear sir or madam, it is Muhammad Khatib, one of the fans of your newspaper. I am writing this letter to you to let you know of some, I hope, rumours I have heard recently about construction plans in our popular public park. I've heard some rumours. So he's talked about how he found out about the plan. As you know, this is the only park within our immediate vicinity, and many people go there for refreshment and relaxing. So many children also play in this park with their peers. With their peers? I have recently heard from some of my neighbours that Royal Construction Company intends to build some apartment blocks in the park. At first, I did not take it seriously until yesterday that I saw some engineers measuring and calculating different dimensions of the park. So, this is how he heard about it. This is what he thinks of the park. We all like our local park, including its beautiful fountain, its playground and amusing facilities for children. So I, as the representative of most of the neighbours, have collected signatures against this project. Therefore, so he doesn't like it. He said that. Therefore, we, as local neighbours, disagree with the plan and ask you to please kindly write an article about the disadvantages of this action and express our great disapproval of the plan. We are looking forward to seeing your article as our voice again. Thanks from your cooperation in advance. Does this person cover the 3 points? Yes. In fact, this person covers the 3 points very well. That's the best part of this performance. This person covers the first point in the first paragraph and then in the second paragraph, how he learnt about the plans. Then he covers the second point, what he thinks of the park, here in the second paragraph and then at the start of the third paragraph. And then he talks about what he thinks of the plans. Okay? So here, this person has covered the task very well. What's the weakest part?
Ending. There is no ending.
The ending here is sufficient. It's not a problem. When you write a letter, you don't really have to say very much more than something like, thanks, well here he's used the wrong word, thanks for your cooperation in advance. It doesn't have to be very much longer than that to end. But the weakest part, is it the grammar? Is it the vocabulary? Is the vocabulary. The weakest part of this is the vocabulary. Because he was using words like peers instead of friends. He was using the word from instead of for. He was talking about a fan of your newspaper instead of a reader of your newspaper, etc., like that. If he forgot to cover all those points, he would only get a band 4 for that first criterion. Okay, we're going to look at some more in those scripts later on. But let's now look at the task 2. So remember, the task 1 is looking at a fairly straightforward task where you're not asked to give too much more than a description in academic, and you only have to just cover 3 points in general training. In task 2 though, it's a bit different because we have to produce ideas and an opinion. We have to give an opinion. And the whole idea of the task 2 is to provoke an opinion, is to produce, is to give a statement that will provoke an opinion. Now there's no right answer in task 2. So your students should be very free to say what they think. If they agree with something, if they disagree, it doesn't matter. But their point must be defended. It must be a defensible point of view. And this last point here is very important. And it's more and more important. It says here, the task is sufficiently prescribed to limit learned answer approach. This means that the task is prescribed. It says you must do this and not that. You must discuss this view and that view, but not that view. You must talk about the reasons, not the causes, not the consequences. You must do this, and that means that they want to stop people just giving a learned answer. Now, some of your students probably like to produce a learned essay. Is that right?
Yeah.
Some of your students say, oh, I've got a really good essay about computers, and I'm going to write that essay about computers. Is that right? So you've got to tell your students, well, okay, that's good, but you've got to change that so that it actually addresses the task. Okay. The task 2, I'll give you some examples of how the task changes and how you have to address them. There are 4 main types of task in task 2. There's a simple opinion essay. To what extent do you agree? There's a discussion essay. What are the reasons for this? What are the consequences of this?